We are here because we are dedicated to helping the entire CrossFit community. Determined to elevate coaches, box owners, athletes, and everything in between, we believe that this mission will begin right here, right now. While this time and this goal begins with you, our hope is that you take this fire ignited within you and weave it into your own life with the same unrelenting passion to give those you have the privilege of coming in contact with the best hour of their day.
All right, Mr. Vellner, welcome home. I assume you are still in full-on recovery mode.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on a holiday mode for sure. I think I don't actually feel terrible. Like I need a lot of, physical recovery, but I think after the games and all the training that goes into the season, you always need that kind of mental break for at least a month or so before you do anything competitive again. So fortunately, we've got a lot of stuff going on that's kind of been put on hold for the last little while. I mean, we have a new baby that Michelle's been doing a lot of the work to take care of, and I get to jump back into the fray on that. And we actually have a wedding coming up in about a month. So we're doing all of our last minute planning and stuff for that. So I've got a lot of things that'll occupy my time. So I wouldn't say I'm in like full on lay on the couch, do nothing mode, but it's really nice to do other things and, service other parts of your life a little more for a little while.
Well, that was the thing I really wanted to talk most about, because I have a 6-month-old. It'll be 6 months in 2 days. And I couldn't imagine training like you train with a baby in the house. So how different was that for you this year?
I think for you, congratulations also, by the way. I didn't know that. But for 6 months old, I think it's a lot harder than it is at 6 weeks old.
I don't want to be the burden of bad news right now, but yeah, it's going to get a lot worse, I think, for you. And then 6 months is actually where it's like, I said this to my wife. I was like, because I left for the games probably around the same time you did. And I was like, when I got home, I was like, I didn't really like her. I'm going to be honest. Like I wasn't a fan of her. And then I got home and I'm like, now I like her.
Yeah. Well, I think, an infant can be a tyrant, right? So I think that really was nice, is that the timing was good enough that he was so young that, to be honest, he doesn't need me very much. My job is to kind of look after Michelle, my partner, and keep her happy and keep her kicking, because she's the one that has to take care of him. He needs mom a lot more than he needs me. And he was born about a week or less than a week before I had to compete at my semifinal. So as soon as we got to kind of the heavier stage of the season, he was around and really brand new. So we kind of, you have time to see it coming, right? Babies don't just appear. And so we got to talk a lot about it and say, hey, like, how are we going to manage this? What's the plan for the short term? And we sort of blocked off that 6, 7, 8 week period. And Michelle said, hey, look, like I'm going to do everything I can to help you be successful and set yourself up for a strong performance. We'll make sure we manage our lives around that. Her parents were here helping as well for about a month, which was super, super helpful, just to have an extra set of hands and do the little things like helping cook, walking the dog, like little things like that just take time. And yeah, I slept in the guest room for a little while before the competition, just to make sure I was well rested. And at the games, I had a second hotel room that I could run to and sleep in. While my parents were there and helping support with Michelle there, so she wasn't just on her own. And so it was, you have to manage it and set yourself up and give yourself a chance, because yeah, of course, I think that if I was trying to, if I was up 3 times a night every night, it would be difficult to perform the way that I would want to. So we made that decision as a team, and the deal was, come now when it's done. She's like, hopefully it goes well, but no matter what, by the time we get home, like, I'm getting tagged in and I got to pay down some of that debt, right? So I'm like, it's fun, and now it's great. Like I'm excited to be doing it and helping out. I feel like not that I've missed little portions of it. I've been around, but it's a bit more fun to get your hands dirty, and I'm keen to do it, I feel like now, right? So it's been really awesome being home and spending more time doing that. And I owe, my family, her family, and her a huge debt, because, that was a team effort, and I'm the guy on the floor doing the things, but that was definitely, it took that whole crew to make it happen.
That must be a weird dynamic as a new father, like being selfish, but not wanting to be like, honey, this is kind of, our deal. Like, this is how we pay the bills. Like, I need this sleep. Like, is that a challenge to be selfish as a competitor, but also not say it improperly to your wife or to your partner?
I think you have to be sensitive to that for sure. And I think that, in general, being an athlete at a high level is a selfish endeavor. And, many of the athletes who don't have kids would be telling you the same stories, right? And I think that I'm very aware of that and sensitive to it already. And I think that every year that I've competed, I try to be aware that when the competition season is done, it's time to sort of service those other parts of your life, because some of it gets just hung up and put on hold for a little while. And it doesn't feel good. I've described it to people before as it's like having you got one bin, and as you sort of put more CrossFit in that bin, you've got to take other things out. And that's just kind of how you divide your energy, right? Like, you don't have infinite time or infinite energy to do things, and you've got to spend that capital in a way that's going to, help you reach whatever goals you have. So I've got sort of a few balls that I'd like to keep in the air. Like, some of them are for a long time it was my education, and now it's my work, and your family and friends and your social life, and then my professional life as an athlete as well. And so as we get closer to the game season, I spend a little less time with my friends or my family or things like that, or just the conversation or what occupies my headspace. It starts to just take up more space in my life. And then come August, September, I get to have it take up no space, and it feels good to release that for a little bit and put a lot more of that family back in, friends and work and other things. So it's difficult, and I think that you have to be sensitive to the way you approach it. And sometimes we had situations where it's I would have loved to have been hey, this isn't the deal, but you also have to be sensitive to everybody else's needs. Sometimes it's hard to be 100% selfish. I mean, actually, it's incredibly easy to be 100% selfish. You should try not to do it. So I caught myself a few times doing that. And in the odd day, even when I was staying in the guest bedroom trying to sleep, you just come spend the odd night with Michelle and the baby, just because I know I'll be up 2 or 3 times, but it's what you do for the people that support you, right? So I tried my best to, because I was getting a break on some of those things. Okay, you get to sleep, you get to whatever. Make sure that I was doing everything I could in other areas, try to change lots of the diapers, try to, in the morning when I get up early, because I typically do, I would try to take the baby in the morning and let Michelle get, 3 hours of sleep extra before maybe he really needed to feed and got really fussy, and then I could go, shake her awake. But I think that the key is being aware of it first. And I think that having a low, a base level of awareness for those sorts of things, will makes you a little less likely to say those things improperly. But I mean, it was just, it's such a team thing that I was very sensitive to how much help I was being given in order to go shine when the lights are on me, right? And I think that that's, everybody else really being unselfish. So I think whenever I get the chance, I try to think of it. And that's what now is all about. Now that I don't have I've pulled all of that CrossFit out of my life for the next month and a half. It's all about kind of spending time with people, and like I said, paying down those debts is kind of the best way I could put it, is that you accrue a lot of that debt from people all over. And just even sending cards, thank you, talking to people like your coach, your sponsors, your friends, who all year round, or especially during critical times, really bend over backwards to help you look good. So I think just those little things go a long way.
I like that, the paying down your debt. From my perspective at the games, having just had a baby, I mean, everyone there is impressive, but Annie really impressed me with the fact that, I mean, were you guys that were competing, do you guys have a moment to appreciate the other performances going on? Obviously you crushed it, everyone did great, but Annie just coming back, like seeing my wife on the road to recovery and then seeing like Annie on the podium again, like it was just insane to me.
I think that, you know, I might be more tuned into some of that stuff than a lot of other athletes are. I like following that kind of stuff, and I like looking at, you know, scores and storylines and things. And I find in competition, it also like it pulls my head out a little bit. Like I get less absorbed in the small things that I'm doing, which helps me relax and actually sometimes helps me perform better. So I was following it pretty closely, and I also know Annie and Björgvin and Yami, their coach, like their whole team I know quite well. And so I spent a lot of time in the back, like in the tunnels and the warm up areas, like we'd chat with them. And I love that. Like that to me was the coolest story. And the way the whole thing happened from the start of the year, I think, I don't know what exactly she is now, like, you know, like 11 months postpartum or something like that, like not quite a year maybe. But she has been very open that her postpartum experience has been very difficult, harder than she expected. And I think that we kind of get desensitized to some of that stuff. Like the only other one we've seen really recently that was very public was Cara Saunders had her baby, and then she came back like fast. And everybody's experience is so different that, you know, I think that even Annie as an athlete saw that and thought, oh, this is going to be not that bad. It's going to be pretty easy to get back to it. I'm super fit. I'm super healthy. Like typically that prototype has a really easy road to recovery postpartum. And so I think that maybe her expectation earlier was different than her reality. And I think that caught her by surprise a bit. So every stage of the way, she was like, you know, very open about her experience, which I think is a really cool thing for women to see. Like, I know, like my partner, it's been cool to see because she's struggled a little bit being like, oh man, it's going to be really tough to get back to where I want to be. And yeah, seeing Annie be like every stage of competition, just surpass her expectations. And not that she had her expectations and she had them in the right place. Like I think in the open, she was unsure if she'd even be able to like complete the open. If, you know, lots of double unders come up or certain things like, is my pelvic floor ready? And then by, you know, quarterfinals, like a whole bunch of GHDs come up and she's like, oh shit. And then, you know, surpassed her expectations there. By semifinals, I don't think she had any expectation of qualifying even. Of course, I'm sure she wanted to, but I don't think it was an expectation. And then, you know, made it through. And I think just every step of the way, she kind of surpassed her expectations and just how infectious Annie is as well. Like she's so happy about that and very like, you see her smile, and it was just like amazing to see her at the games continue that trend and continue to surpass her expectations. I think by the end of the Saturday, she was in like, you know, top 5 contention. And on Sunday, we were kind of with their group, and it's like, she's in a tight race for third. And we were watching when we were done, the women went second because she was tied for third, I think, or something, tied for third. She was in a tie with Kristen Holta. So it was like, whoever wins the final of the two of them will take the podium spot. And we were standing with her coach in the back watching it, and he lost his shit when she won it. It's so cool to see that whole group is so passionate, and like to see just obviously what that meant to her to be like, hey, you know, coming back from what she did. And it's so cool. And we were even standing, like I was standing with Justin Medeiros and Brent Fikowski. Like we were, you know, just chatting, kind of getting our stuff together for the podium thing. And we're watching this, and it was incredible. And Justin, who's, you know, 22, like, and when Annie first started on the scene, and he like was a baby, right? Like we were watching it, and Justin said, like, this is crazy. When was she first on the podium? And I think I said like 2011 was probably the first podium she had when she won.
I think she won in 11, but she competed. 2009 was the year she got her first muscle up, like at the
right.
game.
But I don't think she finished on the podium till 2011 when she won, right?
I think you're right. I'm sure the listeners will correct me, but I think
that's what I said to Justin. So I hope it's accurate. But anyway, the point being, like, he's like, look, so she podiumed in 2011, and now we're 10 years later, and she's just had a baby like within the last year, and she's on the podium again. And he's like, that is incredible. Like that's, you know, you look at like what Tia's done, which is also incredible, but like this is just a different thing. We were all kind of standing there in the back in awe. We were like, this is like, she's a legend. Like that is the coolest thing for what she's done in longevity and in the sport, and is still competitive at the highest level, and to you know, have a kid and come back and be able to do that. And you know, the first thing she did when she came in the back was like, she was so excited to get home and see Freya, right? Like she wasn't able to bring her with her. So, you know, I was at least able to like go hold my kid afterwards and appreciate it with my whole family. And, you know, she wasn't really quite able to do that. So I know the first thing when I saw her like on her story, like 2 days later on Instagram, was like, she was out swinging her kid around. And I think that that's just the coolest thing in the world. Like, and it was cool to see a guy like Justin appreciate that as well, being relatively new to the sport, having not been around for the majority of his career. And then just to be like, you know, he just won the games as the youngest winner of the games ever. And he's just like, that was cool. So I think that, yeah, there's just a cool appreciation for that in the community.
And like you said, not taking anything away from Tia or anyone's performance, they're just different types of incredible. I judged Mallory O'Brien, and during the event, I was like, this girl was like one when I found CrossFit. So it was pretty crazy to see those youngsters. I think, you know, you notice with the females, especially the teenagers, make the leap from the teenage division to the individual competition a little faster than the guys were. There's, except for, I'm not even trying to say his name, Guillerme, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Guillerme, yeah.
Guillerme?
I think that's right.
He's the only one that's made that jump, I think, so far. So,
yeah, and he's 22. You know, he's not 17.
Right, it took a couple of years, but Mallory and Emma and Haley all basically went teen immediately into individuals. What would you, we couldn't figure out why. We were talking about it. We're like, what's the difference there between men and women?
I think part of it is that women develop slightly earlier than the men do. I always have thought that the teen division was strange in that way, because it's sort of a competition to see who's hit puberty the fastest.
That's true. Yeah.
And you look at like, and particularly on the men's side, I think it's like, you know, you get kids who are winning who, you know, oh, this guy can clean 330. And so like they win the clean event, and like, it's like a superpower when you're in the 16-year division. But like all of a sudden you age into the open category, and if you can't clean 330 every single time, like while you're tired, then that's tough. Like everybody's got that superpower. Like, and so I think that it's a little bit like men competing against boys, and all of a sudden you're men competing against men who've also been competing for as long as you've been alive. And so there's like a little bit of that. Whereas I think the women, you know, are a little more, I think there's less discrepancy maybe between the teenagers and the adult women. And I don't know, I think maybe sometimes the upper end strength stuff is more skewed on the men's side as well. Like I even look this year, if you look at the snatch event, the men's starting weight was significantly heavier than the women's starting weight, in my opinion.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you look at like, you know, what the field did, and like people missed the first bar for the men, like 3 guys did, like nobody did on the women's side. I think that some events are programmed in different ways where, you know, the weight is just different for the men's and women's. So some events, the women move a little faster than the men, some it's the opposite. So there might be a little bit of that plays into it. But I don't know. I think a lot of it is developmental, and maybe we just haven't seen those studs come through yet. Like we haven't seen that many of them on the women's side. There's been like 3. So you know, we'll see. I think there was one in my semifinal in the Atlas Games. We had one gal who was 16 trying to make it through, and she just missed the last chance qualifier by like 1 point. So you know. That would have been, even if this year we had 2 17-year-olds and a 16-year-old, it would have been crazy. And then she went on to win the teenage division at the games. Like, so it's pretty impressive. Like those girls can compete with the women who've been around for a long time. And you know, like girls like Mallory and Emma showed it. Like Mallory won an event at the games. They crushed everybody at the Granite Games. It wasn't an accident, right? And we'll see. We might get those guys that come in, but I'm not sure exactly what we're missing there, but I think it might be a bit of that they age into the open division. And there's just a bit of a reality check. And like, I know when we had for years, in my regional in the East, we had the champions from the teen division, I think for a couple of years in a row, were from our region. So they aged into the open division and competed at our regional. And there was like a lot of fun hype around it. But then like you were coming into a division competing against Matt and I, and you'd like walk onto the floor and we just like throttled them. And then there was like a bit of a, oh, ooh, this is like the adult division. So, you know, I don't know. I've seen it up close for the boys a few times. And my hope is that you don't see guys like getting hurt young, because they go so hard when they're 14, 15, 16 that they're kind of wearing themselves out. But it's interesting. The teen division's always been a curious one for me. And I think it kind of goes a couple of different directions. I've seen some athletes, you know, my path to CrossFit was that I was an athlete in several sports before. And then CrossFit is kind of a second athletic career for me. It's a cool way for me to stay competitive, you know, service that side of my life and have an outlet for that, and have a lot of fun and challenge myself. And I think that there's a lot of teenage athletes that I've seen recently who have aged up and moved away from CrossFit because they've gone to university, and then they're like, hey, I'm going to go play collegiate volleyball. And because they were such good athletes already, they were able to learn sports quickly that maybe they didn't play at a high level, but they then could just transition into an athletic career as a young adult, which I think is super cool. Like that to me is, that's what teenage CrossFit should be doing. And obviously that's my bias because I come from a sports background. And I think that to have the ability to create a lot of good general skills in fitness, and then one day be able to be like, okay, well, I'm off to college and like, I'll play some sports, make some friends, and just be able to like walk onto a team because you're just that fit and skilled. That's exceptional. And I've seen a couple of those stories, and that like, I think is so cool. So I don't know, it's interesting to see, but then you have the people like, you know, the Justin Medeiros and the Guillermo Harroses who are exceptional CrossFitters at a young age, and then they just become more exceptional CrossFitters at a slightly older age, right? So, you know, I think it's just whatever people want to do.
You bring up sports. You played lacrosse and competed in gymnastics prior to CrossFit. So I grew up wrestling and playing tennis, both individual sports. Which
that's an interesting combo.
Yeah, well, I'm 5'3", so I didn't have a whole lot of options. But I love individual sports. I love being in charge of, you know, how I perform and no one impacting that. You know, coming from the lacrosse background, which do you prefer now? Because you were also a team member of CrossFit Plateau in 2015.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's really good things in both, and I think that they both teach you really important things. And I'm glad that I have done both. You know, CrossFit to me is an individual sport that we've kind of morphed into a team sport. I think we've kind of, you know, put a square peg in a round hole on that one. And people may disagree with me, but that's just like how I kind of feel about it. I think in general, the idea of CrossFit is to challenge yourself and to, you know, like develop and push your own boundaries. So it feels forced to me almost. So I did a team year, and I'm glad I did it. I think to me it was a development year back then. There was a lot more power output in the team side. It was a bit more of the like specialist era, maybe the last year of that kind of era. And those were the things I needed to work on as an individual. So I spent a year working on shit that I needed to do, and it was really good for my development. And then when I went to the games as an individual, I was ready to compete and not just be there and take 30th, right? I came in my first year as an individual and I came third. So it was an important stepping stone for me as a CrossFit athlete. But you know, I have these interesting conversations now because now we have a kid, right? It's, you know, what are we going to do like for sports or activities, or like, what are we going to try to instill in a kid, right? And my partner was a cross-country ski racer, like a national team cross-country ski racer. So she was an individual sport person, endurance sport, when I'm not a huge endurance sport person. So we have those arguments. But I think that individual sports are great because you're right, it teaches you ownership and discipline, right? I mean, when it comes down to it and a competition happens, the decisions you make are reflected. Nothing else happens. Either you prepared well or you didn't prepare well, or you made the right decision or the wrong decision. But whether you win or you lose, you have to take ownership of that, because no one else was out there with you. And so I think there's something really good about that. It sort of teaches you that, you know, you reap what you sow, and you're in control of your destiny. Every day that you come to training and you work out, like that's what you're doing, is you're trying to increase your odds of success, but it's all about what you do. In a team context, that there's not as much of that. You know, you're part of a machine, and you can be flawless and still lose. And that's challenging. And I mean, not about winning and losing too. In an individual sport, you can be flawless and lose to someone who's just better than you. So, you know, I think that in a team, it teaches you a lot about communication, and how to deal with people under stress. And that was something that I was usually quite good at. And when I played lacrosse for years, I would usually be a captain on the teams. And that was like one of my biggest roles, is like figuring out how do you get the most out of an individual, for the betterment of the team. Is because everybody deals with stress differently. They deal with criticism differently. And if you want to maximize the team's potential, you've got to get every piston firing at its max capacity. And if I talk to athlete A the same way I talk to athlete B, you know, you get a completely different response. So learning how to motivate and talk to people in a way that works for them, whether it's the same way you think or not, is irrelevant. You just have to do that for the team, and knowing that, like, sometimes you do things not because it's going to be good for you, but it's going to be good for the group. I think that is a valuable skill. And I also just love the social aspect of team sports. I think that there's something really important there for me, developmentally as a kid, like just to be spending time with groups of people, just striving towards a common goal. And you see that in some individual sports as well, where you know, in gymnastics, like you have a team, but ultimately you're an individual as well. So it's a little bit different. You still are trying to beat those people. And that's kind of like almost how CrossFit is for me now, right? It's like I'm friends with a lot of the people I compete with, or you know, I have maybe a team with that my coach coaches several athletes, but at the end of the day, like my job is to beat those other guys. So it's interesting, and I don't know if I value one more than the other, because I think that they both teach you really, really important lessons. I think the trick for us now is just finding whatever one that we think our kid will like and will enjoy watching. I think is also an important one. I also got to show up for all these practices and games and things like that. So something that we like and that he'll like, and you know, we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm really pushing my daughter to wrestle. My wife is not having it, but we'll see what happens. So you mentioned about the team. Something you made me think of is I'm part of the CrossFit seminar staff, and James Hobart and I had a conversation about being the flow master, and it's really all about bringing out the best of each individual in that weekend from us. Like, and sometimes that means what you're best at as the leader, you can't do because you have to let the other person do it. So it's interesting you say that. It's the same thing there. I mean, you've primarily been an athlete since being involved in CrossFit. Did you ever have a desire to become, you know, a higher level CrossFit coach or to be a part of seminar staff?
It's funny, not really. And it's not because I don't like to coach people or work with people, but I think that I've always just, since I've been in CrossFit, I've been in school and I've been on a career path, and I haven't had a lot of extra time to do other things. So it's been sort of like, I just didn't have space to add another thing in. And, you know, I've, you know, helped out with little things at boxes here and there if they needed an extra hand. But it's interesting. And I've seen you guys work, most of you guys, before. I've had the opportunity to coach a class with you on Watt on the Waves and see James. And, you know, I know James Mack and guys like that. And see like how you guys run a class, guys like Connor Murphy, people who are really good at it, Austin Maliolo. And I have a huge appreciation for people who have that skill, right? And I think that my skill set is not as geared towards large groups, and I'm sure I could develop it. And doing something like the level 1s and level 2s and the seminar training stuff would help me build that. But it's not really what my career is either. You know, I work as a chiropractor. I work in a lot of one-on-one setting, and I love one-on-one coaching. I think that I really like details, and I like to, you know, learn the intricacies of like one person and try to help them understand things on a different level. And that's, to me, the really fun part. And it's so impressive to me to see you guys do it to a large group and make those people feel like they're individually serviced really well. And make everybody walk out feeling like, you know, that class was just for them. Cause I don't know if I'm good enough at that. And like, maybe it's fear of failure and things like that, but that's just not like, I just feel like I can't, I want to give everybody more attention than I possibly can in like an hour-long class. So I feel bad at the end being like, I didn't give as much as I should have. So, you know, that's like when I work with patients, that's like, I really try to dig in, and I really try to get involved. And when I'm like, if someone at the gym asks me for like a tip or a piece of advice, like I'll give you 30. Like I want to see you get it. Like I'll tell it to you 100 different ways until one of them resonates with you. Like I really do enjoy that. But it's just funny. Yeah, I feel like partly it's because I haven't had the time to dedicate to it, because of just too many other moving pieces in my life. But yeah, I think maybe I was a little intimidated too, because I've seen some of the best do it. And I'm just like, poof, I respect a lot the coaches who do a really good job of it. And it's just like I said, I don't know if it exactly aligns with my skill set.
Well, that'd be like watching you compete and saying, I can't do CrossFit.
Yeah, I know it takes time for sure, but like I don't know if I certainly haven't yet had the time to dedicate to it, and maybe someday. But
so let's talk about being a chiropractor. First of all, I love cracking my neck. What's actually happening? Is that bad for me to crack my own neck?
No, it's not bad for you. I mean, it'd be bad for you if you did it like really badly. Mostly really what it is, it's like a pressure release. There's joint capsules in a bunch of those joints, and as those capsules get pulled apart, it's like, you know, when you think about high pressure system to low pressure system, the outside areas of fluid just rush into the inside of the joint as you pull it apart. So it makes a bit of a popping sound. It's nothing crazy. Really what it's doing is it's just like a quick increase in range of motion. So most of the time when we're doing that kind of a maneuver, it's to try to, you could think of it almost like greasing your joints, like trying to get a little more range of motion out of the physical joint. So part of the trick is figuring out, is the joint that needs to get worked on, or is it muscles that are limiting the range, or is it, you know, what actually is the limiter? And, you know, there's a lot of, it's interesting. There's a lot of theories and some competing theories about why there's a net positive effect from that sort of a maneuver. But like, you know, it's neuromuscular, and it sort of affects the muscles around the joints, and there's some joint level effect, and there's some fluid exchange and things like that. So yeah, you should be fine. I wouldn't say, try not to be super aggressive. You know, I probably should say let a professional do it, but if it's something that you do all the time, I don't think it's a big concern. If you ever do it and you have like a sharp pain or something like that, though, then maybe stop and maybe go check it out.
No, it's usually a relief. But my old chiropractor back in New York, Dr. B, she used to yell at me for self-adjusting.
Yeah.
So
the concern a little bit is that if you do it a lot over the course of a lifetime, you might develop like a hypermobility in the neck. So it's like, you know, it's meant to increase mobility of a certain joint. So if you get it to like a normal whatever range, and then you continue to do it all the time, you can get actually like hypermobile. If you think of everything on like a continuum of stability and mobility, if you're way at the stability end, it means the joint doesn't move at all, which is terrible. You know, that's like you're talking about frozen shoulder, like, you know, fused vertebra, like that kind of thing. If you're way on the other end of mobility is great until your shoulder dislocates. So, you know, same sort of situation is like, these things are good until they're really bad. Like you need a certain amount of stability in order for your body to support itself. That's why core strength is important. All those things are so valuable for injury prevention, right? So you want mobility that's stable. You don't want hypermobility, and you don't want hyperstability. So yeah, you got to be a little careful. Like you don't want your head spinning around all the way. But yeah, that would be probably why your chiro was like, hey, don't do it all the time. Because if it sort of becomes a tick, you're doing it all the time, whether you need it or not. I think there's some concern that in the end you get too mobile, and then there's maybe not enough stability to keep your head attached to your shoulders.
Well, I wouldn't call myself too mobile. When
Okay, there you go.
When you were going to chiropractor school, or even now, do you get pushback from that community about CrossFit?
Do I get pushback from the chiropractic community or the CrossFit community?
Well, I guess both, but I was referring to the chiropractic community.
For competing in CrossFit, like that, it's like, I'm going to get hurt or it's bad for you or whatever?
Yeah, whether it's, I mean, I'm sure at first you go to school and some people are like, oh, that's Pat Vellner. Like, I do CrossFit. He's really, and then some professors are like, you're just a student to them, right? But they hear that you do CrossFit and probably don't understand the level in which you do it.
Oh, Jason, the academia sucks. There's this weird ego trip in academia that's like, your professors have all gone to school and made school their career. And so there's this weird atmosphere, at least this has been my experience, that, if you're there, that should be your number one priority. You shouldn't be doing anything else. You should be doing only that. And it should be the only thing you value, because to some of your professors, that's their reality. So there's this, like, it's almost like people get upset when you have something else going on that you also consider important, equally so, to what you're doing at school. I know over the course of, so my first 3 years where I finished on the podium, I was at school. And I was trying to compete throughout the years. I was constantly asking the registrar and my various professors for, like, hey, I'm going to be away for this and that. Can I do this extra assignment because I'm going to miss this, whatever. And you just have, it's so much hoop jumping. It's like mandatory things that you have to be at, but it's like an attendance thing. And it's just, they were constantly just absolutely gouging me for, like, percentages on courses, because they just be like, no, you have to be at this seminar. It's like, well, what is it? It's a clinical education seminar for, like, this condition. I'm like, what if I just write a paper on that condition? Can I just, like, be excused from that? And they're like, no, if you miss this seminar, you lose 5% of your total grade. I'm like, well, that seminar happens to be, like, during, like, regionals, say, or something. So it's like, well, I'm not going to be there. Like, I'm telling you right now, and it's like 5 months away, that I'm not going to be there. Are you telling me there's nothing we can do in 5 months to get prepared to do this? And be like, no. And they were just, like, ruthless. So I had a lot of butting heads with my institution for, many years. And then it's remarkable how much that changed as soon as I was about to graduate. I feel like 2018, I finished second, and then I had another like 8 or 10 months of clinical rotations to do. And then I was gone. I was out the door. I was graduated. It's all good. And that last, like, 4 months, boy, did they ever want me to do, like, alumni papers and this and that. And, hey, can we write this story on you? And, like, you and me, right? We did this together. I was like, no fucking way. Like, we did not do this together. You were, like, an absolute roadblock every step of the way. And it's interesting. I think that that's an academic thing. I think the profession operates a little bit differently. There's different people who practice different ways, but a large part of our profession is geared around, active care, like getting people back to activity and back to being mobile and maintaining that into later years of life, like a lot of rehab oriented care. And that's a lot of how I practice, is like, I do a lot of lifestyle intervention, rehab, active therapy. So people love it. They're like, you're a perfect example of, like, how to stay. And maybe, like, I'm an extreme example. I'm the first to tell people that, like, what I'm doing is not necessarily healthy. You want to fall somewhere between what I'm doing and what you're currently doing. And I think that it's good to see, those, I don't know what, like, beacons of fitness and things like that people can latch onto, and it looks good and sexy, and say, like, hey, cool. And so I get a lot of people who come see me because they're like, this guy knows about, like, fitness and health, and it gives you a certain amount of reputation, I guess, although I haven't been in the profession that long, that I know what I'm doing. So that's really cool, because I think you can work for many, many years to try to get that. And having a name that people see in a newspaper or a headline somewhere gives you a certain amount of credibility right away. So it's cool, because then people listen to me, right? And I think that when you're a young professional, that's sometimes a big challenge. So and that's been really cool. And so the profession's been generally really accepting. I think that, you know, educational institutions are always trying to reinforce what they think you need to do. And so I spent a lot of years having people tell me, this is going to be the hardest thing you ever do in your life, and da 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 da. And like, so whenever you're asking to like leave or go do something else or whatever, it's like you're met with confusion, because they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, you know, most people can barely like graduate this course. Like, how are you able to do it and then also like leave for like 2 weeks to go do something else and this and that? And it's like, I don't know, I just am, like, can I go? And or like, you know, I think that it's interesting. And I'm an extreme person, I think, obviously. So when I was at school working, I was working very, very hard. So yeah, I was trying to afford myself those freedoms, knowing that in a month's time, I'm going to leave and I'm going to miss things. And I had to build myself a buffer in my education so that when I then had to leave and miss an assignment that was worth whatever that they wouldn't let me make up, it wouldn't cause me to not graduate. So yeah, it was an interesting ride. So I'm glad it's over, but so far my experience in the profession has been super positive. You know, I work at a clinic that does a lot of, you know, they work with the university on the island, and we do a lot of work with athletes and people who are generally more willing or interested in increasing their fitness and their health. So it's cool. It's a great tie-in for me.
Is chiropractic care free in Canada?
It's not. It's covered under like certain insurance plans, but only up to a certain limit. I think they're changing it right now in some provinces where like physio and chiro will follow under the same umbrella. But like right now where we are, you know, your benefits for massage and physio are quite extensive, and chiro is a little bit less. So ideally we'll get that wrapped into one kind of complementary care package. And then it's just a little bit easier, but people are paying. It's more right now, I think people have extended benefits are like great and covered. But if you have just like a basic benefit package, it's not as much. So certain professions are awesome. Like I see a ton of RCMP, like police officers and people like that, because their benefits are awesome. So, and they do a lot of hard work and they carry a lot of gear and stuff like that. So I see a lot of people like that and they're great. But yeah, ideally that'll get changed in the next little bit.
How did you stay motivated to finish school at the same time you saw that you could make a living doing CrossFit?
I don't know. I think it would be different maybe if I wasn't winning. I think that the fact that I was doing school and it was like I was still finishing on the podium made me feel like I could get away with it. Whereas like if you went and finished like 8th and you're like, man, I'm in the top 10, but like, you know, maybe I could contend for that podium if I just, you know, drop this, then maybe that would push me to do it. So there's a couple different things too. Again, my program is quite unforgiving, and there actually wasn't an opportunity to like put it down for a year and then come back and pick up where you left off. I think there was like, they had an arrangement for a certain amount of months you could leave, but I think it was mostly meant to service people who got pregnant or something like that and had a kid during school so that they could come back and finish the program. So, you know, the idea was, hey, look, like this is my future career. Being an athlete has a shelf life, like it or not. And I think if you walk away from this now, you're going to have to either come back and start from zero or potentially find something else to do. Or you can just, you know, you can just grow up and finish it for like another 3 years and then you can do what you want. So I did that. I took, I think, the harder path, and I finished my school and you know, we moved out to Vancouver Island, and then, you know, the choice was then mine. Like, do I want to register with the college and do I want to work, or do I want to just compete in CrossFit? And, you know, again, I think that being a bit risk averse, say, I wanted to keep working a little bit and keep my hands moving. And I think it's challenging. You learn a lot in a program like that, and you develop a lot of physical skills. And I think if I just said, okay, for the next 4 years, I'm not going to do any therapy, I'm not going to use my brain in that way at all, think clinically, I'm just going to compete in CrossFit, I'm going to think about burpees and thrusters for 4 years, and I'm going to be the best. And then when you come back, you know, I would have to personally, I would have to take like a year of, you know, doing continuing education, like re-immersing myself in that manner of thinking in that environment, you know, before I even felt comfortable dealing with the patient and being like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. My skills are sharp. I can help you. And that's what people are coming and paying for, right? Like they want you to know what you're doing and trust that when I say something, it's right, or it's based on something, and I know what I'm talking about. So I thought that, like, in order for me to be competent and comfortable treating patients, I would either need to take like a full year of re-education once I decided to come back to it, or if you just work, you know, a couple days a week, keep your skills sharp, keep yourself thinking clinically, and you just kind of keep that fire lit at like a baseline, then you're all good. So that's what I decided to do, is just, you know, keep doing it. You know, I don't need to do it a lot. Right now, my schedule for the last while has been basically I train like 5 days a week and I work 2 days a week. And then that's it. Like I any days that I'm off of training, I work in the clinic. So I don't really get any days off, which is, you know, we'll see if I burn out of that at some point, but it's been working okay. And it's a totally different gear, right? Like I think you get tired in a different way when you're thinking all day and you're working with patients and you're problem solving than I do from a day of doing, like a day of doing thrusters and riding the assault bike. So I've enjoyed it so far. It's a way to like switch gears and just feel like I'm doing something completely different. And I can't think about CrossFit when I'm in the clinic, and when I'm in the clinic, or when I'm in the gym, I don't really think about the clinic, although except I think I have some patients that work out at my gym. So every now and then I see people and I like watch their movement and I'm like, see what they're doing, if they're feeling any better. But I try to, it's sort of compartmentalized in a way that allows me to be immersed in whatever I'm doing on that day, right?
I know it's Saturday morning, so I'm going to let you go. You mentioned earlier, you're friendly in the back, Justin, Brent. From my perspective as a judge, you have the biggest range of who you are off the floor and who you are on the floor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you come out on the floor, I'm like, this guy's angry. Like, this guy's mad. Like, you come out there, your face changes, you're very stoic. I mean, I think different people get different, you know, excitement different ways, but you come out and, at least to my perspective, very, very serious. Versus, I'll give you an example. Noah comes out and he's like giving you instructions on how he wants you to count his reps, right? He'll be like, hey,
right.
can you do this? Can you count loud? I'm like, dude, this is my job. Like, I know what I'm doing. So, but I don't think I've ever really heard an athlete talk through like what's going on from the moment you hear an event through the warm-up practice, through the event itself, and then after. So for example, like growing up wrestling, I have matches like I couldn't tell you what happened during the match. And then, you know, I'll watch it back and be like, that wasn't even me. Like what goes through your mind maybe when Dave's announcing a certain event? Like this year, I believe he announced the run and clean. He announced the free handstand, a couple others. What's going on in your mind, at least, when you're sitting in the back, you know, 80 athletes or so, depending on where we are in the weekend? Most of them are just thinking of, you know, silly questions to ask to help them get through that meeting, you know. And I'm sure you guys think about like, oh, here goes so-and-so asking another silly question. But what's going through your mind in that moment? And then how does that change as you get ready to go out on the competition floor?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I mean, for one thing, I think that the way people behave on and off the floor has I think it has everything to do with stress management, and how you best deal with stress. I think the best athletes have figured out what their persona is, that allows them to channel that energy and make it useful. And you know, you've seen different things over the years. Like Matt is very intense in the back and in the corrals and on the floor. And I think that I have found over the years that if I walk around with my shoulders tense like that for the whole weekend, it's exhausting to keep your energy dialed to 10 the whole time. And so I like you say, I kind of ride these waves of like when I can turn it on and when I turn it off. And I think a lot of people struggle with that like to hit that switch and be like, okay, we're on now, competitive mode, and just like beep boop, walk on the floor and do your thing, and then walk off and be like, switch off. I don't think that's a skill that a lot of people have. So they take longer time to ramp up and to ramp down. So, you see them maybe in the warm up areas a little bit more intense, and following the event, they might still be riding that high energy for a while. But yeah, I think that for me, it's a lot of stress management. It keeps me loose. It keeps me, if I'm looser, I'm going to compete a little better. So I tend to like joke around and talk with people, even as far as in the corrals, like when we're lined up to before we go on the floor. And then when we walk onto the floor and you do your run out, that's kind of when I'm like focused. And I think that part of that for me is I've already made up my mind as far as what I'm going to do. I think that when Dave or whoever announces events, when we get information, I analyze things pretty quickly, and I do it very thoroughly. And I think that I have a pretty good understanding of what the demands of an individual event are, where the bottlenecks are, and where I stand maybe relative to the field. I pay really close attention to the field for periods of the year, and I think I have a good idea of who's going to be very good, strong in this event, who's going to be weak, whatever, and I've always been pretty tapped into like, I don't care about seeing the leaderboard, that kind of stuff. I love knowing the points. I love knowing where the scores are. I love knowing who I need to race, who I need to beat, and knowing as races take shape, like where I need to push relative to someone else. I know that that's not people don't love talking about that as an approach, because it's all about, being focused on your lane and execution. But I think if you can use that information in a productive way, it can help to push you. At the end of the day, you are going to be measured against these people. And so knowing that, as long as it doesn't stress you out or freak you out, is still valuable. So yeah, I think that I look at events and I kind of know, okay, I want to try to stay close to this guy. Like they're probably a little better than me at this, but if you can stay in close distance to them, maybe you can push on them at a critical moment and whatever. But I analyze things fast. I try to come to terms with what my plan is. I talk to my coach a lot like that. Like we talk through events. I saw she actually was on like some sort of a vlog recently, and someone asked her what it was like or what she says to me in times like these or something. It was like Saturday night of the games this year, and she kind of just laughed and she's like, what do you mean times like these? Like Pat already knows what he's going to do. I just ask him, and then he tells me, and you can see like as he talks, he sort of like accepts what the plan is. And then it's like, I need to like put it down and talk about it and lay it out. I'm like, I can accept it. And then I move past it, and then I'm good to go. So yeah, it's funny. I've always found that I chat a lot, and it makes me feel comfortable, and it makes me feel loose, and it makes me feel relaxed. So I try not to do it to people who are the opposite. Like if I know certain athletes are, they want to isolate themselves to get focused, I don't go chase them down and like yap in their ear to mess with them. Like I try to there's certain athletes who are more like me, more or less. And I talk to them, and we sort of help calm each other down, and you take the floor, and you can be at peace with what your plan is and try to execute. But I'm definitely one of the guys who asks a lot of those questions in briefings.
You're not terrible. You're not, yours are often, you've thought of something that we needed to hear, because we're listening as well, like the judges.
Right. Oh yeah. Okay.
So a lot of times we're hearing the workout at the same time you are, and we're trying to work through our head, what does that mean for us? But just because it's the most recent, 600 meters, what was it, 690, the lunge, right?
Yeah.
Last event. You pretty much had second place locked up, I think.
Yeah,
right?
I did. I was like 100 something points clear of Brent.
Right. So 3, 2, 1, go. Like I can tell you, like as an average CrossFitter, 600 meters, I'm like, okay, shit, I gotta go 600. Like, let's get to 200. Maybe I'll pick it up a little bit. I'll do that first set of 15. I'll be like, oh damn, I got 5 more of those. Like, and then I would go to pick. Like, what goes through the best of the best in the workout from that row? Like 3, 2, 1, go. Are you like fired up, positive self-talk, or are you like, what am I having for dinner?
Wow. So the rows are maybe not the best example because that row was basically irrelevant in that workout.
Yeah.
So you
Just get through it.
So you had to row, moderate, hard, sustainable effort. Like you don't want to come off 10 seconds behind somebody and have to try to make it up in the pull-ups, but it didn't really matter. You weren't going to win it on the rower. So I think that everybody was very composed on the rower, and it was like 2 minutes of just chilling. So that was like, a bit lazy, and it was kind of cool because this is the last event in the Coliseum for the weekend. So you can kind of look around and take it in for a little bit and then try to refocus as you closed in on the pull-ups, because that workout was all about pull-ups, really. I think that, if you separated yourself a bit there and got on the lunges faster and broke away, it was hard to close gap on people. So I knew that going in, so here's how this works. So I went, being in the second heat or having a heat advantage is really valuable. And that's always one of my goals. Even at the start of the competition this year, when I blew up event 1, the plan at the end of that day was you need to be in the top 10 so that you don't lose a heat advantage on day 2. That was the only thing I cared about at that point. So, because it cannot be understated how big of an advantage it is. For example, the running clean workout, the first one, everybody had kind of a plan. We saw the first heat go and nobody finished. And we were like, holy fuck, everybody has to run way faster than we thought. So every other heat realized that was a running workout, not a clean workout. And so you get an advantage from that. And so this last one for the pull-ups, I talked to Michelle a bit about it, and, her feedback was, it's a lot of pull-ups. I think that probably, like, when was the last time you did 6 sets of 15 pull-ups, like in rapid succession like that? Pull-ups will break down. So is it smart to, break them earlier, do something like 10-5 in the early sets to set yourself up for success later in the pull-ups? We watched the first heat go, the first 3 or 4 guys off the pull-up bar did them largely unbroken. Maybe the last set broke, and then they went on to win the workout. The lunges seemed to be mostly unaffected by their pull-ups. So it was like, okay, game plan change. That was a smart way to program the workout, because 15 is a just big enough set that you're stretching it for that many in a row. But because you had to do all 15 before you advance to the next bar, like doing sets of 12 is impossible, because you aren't going to do 12 and then drop for 3, right? So it pushed everybody to stretch their pull-up sets a little bit. And then I think I went 15s. I broke the last 2. And that was kind of where Justin pulled ahead a little bit, and he got to the lunges like 10 seconds ahead of me and was basically gone. And at that point, when I got to the lunges, I was like, okay, Justin just won the games. Like, unless he completely explodes on the lunges, which I just don't think is going to happen. So I frankly kind of shut it down on the lunges and was like, enjoy this last bit of lunging. You just came second again. You're all good. Just like, whatever, sort it out. So, I needed to beat him by like 7 places in order to win the games. And it was clear to me at that point, he was one of the first ones to the lunges. It's just like, that will not happen. There's no way. So all good, no problem. But yeah, I mean, watching the event in the first heat gave us a little bit of information about that stuff. I thought it was funny. The rowing thing, the great story from rowing is the race was like, really, Justin and I were in a race, like he had mostly won it by the time we took the floor for the last event. And I think in a general fitness event, that was pretty clear to me. I knew that he had ripped his hand doing the 1-rep max snatch the night before. So the only thing in my head was like, if he starts to slip on the pull-ups, I can win. And if it fucks him up enough that a bunch of people beat him, then I can win. So by the end of the pull-ups, when he was fine, I was like, yeah, he's fine. And so that's all good. Like, I knew that, and I had enough time to process that in the workout. It's no big deal. The rowing was funny because I think a couple people, the race for 3rd and 4th was pretty hot. I think if BK beat Brent by like 2 people or like 1 person finished between them, BK would have jumped him for 3rd. So BKG was on my left. I don't know if he was rowing super hard or what was going on, but he lost his rower seat at some point.
Saw that. I remember that. Yeah.
It was so funny. He dropped the loudest F-bomb. He was just like, next to me, I was like, what is happening? Because everybody else is very relaxed. And like, I'm kind of peeking at Justin's screen, seeing what he's rowing. Like, we were rowing like 146, 147. Like, everybody's kind of doing the same thing. It wasn't a rowing workout, like I said. And then like, I don't know how BKG managed to pull that off. Like what he was doing on the rower for a 600 meter row that caused that kind of a meltdown. But I thought it was the funniest thing ever. So that was a weird event. Yeah. You got to start with this very relaxed, composed situation where, you know, you just kind of had to do your thing for like 2 minutes, and then the workout started, and then the workout was like 90 pull-ups. And then the lunges were, you know, I think that you could survive the lunges, and that wasn't like the meat of the workout. So it was fun. You got to like enjoy the arena a little bit, watch BKG screw himself on the rower. So yeah, it was good. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things from the time it's announced. I think there's like, you do the initial processing. I always think about like, where's the advantage? Like, is there something that I can do that's not obvious, that's different from everybody else, that's going to give me an advantage? And then, is that potentially illegal? And then I ask that question. And then, you know, from there, it's watching the heat go before you, and then making a last minute adjustment, maybe based on what you see. If somebody did something that was super successful that you want to emulate, or if somebody did something that you were planning on doing and they self-destructed, you're like, okay, maybe reevaluate. And then, yeah, from there, like once I'm on the floor, I'm pretty much turned on. And yeah, it's funny you said I like generally am fairly stoic, and I think I get that a lot from like my family. I look at photos sometimes, and I have like this neutral face. Like I have photos from the sprint, like the 500 meter sprint, where I look like mouth closed, like I just woke up, like, and I don't know how I do that or why, but I definitely don't make very exciting faces while I'm working out, relative to maybe some of my peers, and that get really excited and, you know, hype the crowd and ride those highs really high. I think my style has always been to maintain an even keel, and I think of it like arousal curves, where if you're under excited, you might underperform. You need a bit of that energy, but if you overdo it, like, you know, you can blow up fast, you can over pull lifts, you can overdo it quite easily and burn out. So, you know, your most effective strategy is to not be up and down. It's to just ride it right through the middle in the sweet spot for the whole thing. And so, you know, that's how I approach competition as a whole. And that's why I'm able to, you know, lose events like I did this year in the beginning, and come back from that and have it not affect me. And, you know, at the same time, win several events and walk off the floor and move on to the next one really quickly. So I don't know, it's a style thing, I think. And people just learn the longer they compete, what works best for them. I think the best thing you can do as a young competitor is try on a few different hats, because some people just compete very differently from others, but they're just as successful. So try on a couple different things, see what you like, what works well for you, and doesn't feel, you know, forced or fake, and just do it, like whatever. Nobody says you got to do it the same as anybody else.
Yeah, we just, you know, we do our best to. Some people come out and they're chatty, and like when I've had you, I'm just like, okay, stay out of this dude's way and just let, you know, all the reps to the best of your ability. Before we go, what's your plan for the future with CrossFit? Or at least what you have written down right now. Are you gonna? Pete Shaw wants to know if you're gonna just run through and try to sweep the Masters from 35 to 65. Is that something that as you get a little older you start to think about, like, okay, what's next? Can I go team? You know, people are talking. Yeah. Is Matt gonna come back and go team? Is T gonna go team? What's
Man, Jason? I just came second at the games. You're asking me if I'm gonna go Masters?
I didn't mean it from that perspective. I'm not talking about next year, but in the future.
You know, I haven't thought a lot about that. I think that I'm trying to focus more on, you know, what my individual career will look like at the end. And, you know, I'm going to put another good couple years in probably, and then we'll see. I think a lot of that depends on how your personal life develops and stuff. You know, we've a kid now, we're starting a family. I think at a certain point, if I did want to continue to compete Masters, it would look very differently than it does now. You know, I think that would be that's a career of passion, I think, where you're competing because you love to compete. And I think it would feel very differently. The stress would be very different. The pressure would be different. And that would be just to like go hang out with the crew again, right? And get together once a year, get the band together and do it. And, maybe I would. I think that there's always for me, when my career is done competing as an individual, it's time to start to ramp up my clinic days and, start to get back into that career path and service that a little bit more seriously, and maybe have an opportunity to build something more on the clinical end than I can right now, just because I don't have the time to do it. So, that's always the balance for me, is that I think that when I decide to hang up as an individual, my CrossFit is going to drop significantly and my clinical career is going to increase in time demand. And I'll have kind of more time to spend with the family. So I'm not, if I was going to do it, I'm not sure I would win it, because I would just be a different athlete. And so part of me wonders if I would be willing to do that. Like, I don't show up to not win. So that's hard on my athlete identity. So maybe I'll grow out of that. Maybe not. And we'll see what it looks like. But I think personally, I know yourself a little bit. And if I'm just going to do that, it's going to be frustrating and whatever, and not be a positive experience, then I would maybe not do it. But, I hope that at some point I'll be able to let that go. But we'll see. I think that's sort of for now, I'm going to probably do a couple events in the off season, with my partner on mat leave right now. I mean, she's a family doctor, and we have never really had time to do anything. I've always been like a fly in, fly out competitor. Like, I show up like a day before and I go to work and I do what I'm there to do, and then I leave immediately. I've had competitions I've gone to where I had to fly out before the podium ceremony. And it's just like, that's what my life's been like because of school and work. And I think that we now have an opportunity to enjoy some of the little things a little more, and spend some time, go to a competition and hang out for a week. And I think that that's the plan in the next, year, is to spend some time enjoying those things a little more. So I think I'm going to let her pick a couple events and say, like, where do you want to go? Like, we'll go somewhere, we'll spend some time. I'll go work out for a little bit. We'll try to pay for our trip, and then that's how we'll do it. But, and then we'll regroup for the season next year. So in the short term, that's kind of the plan. Maybe hit a couple of nice off-season events and then regroup. And for the long term, it's hard to say. It'd be nice to stay involved in the CrossFit world in some way. I think, I have a pretty easy avenue as a manual therapist to sort of stay involved in some way. So, I might get in touch with CrossFit Health and see if there's any way to start bridging a gap there. And and just see if you can maintain some of those connections. And, I've spent a lot of years making myself a prominent member of that community, a visible member of that community. And I think it would be cool to be able to move out of the athlete role at some point and then take on just a slightly different role, and then still stay involved in that community. That would be kind of the dream,
One day it won't be Thorisdottir doing the body work. It'll be Vellner Chiropractic. All of the care for the athletes out there. Well, in the very short term, I will let you go take care of that baby and have a fantastic wedding. I'm sure everyone's giving you advice. Same advice, just enjoy it, right? Everybody says it goes too fast. It does, but I'm sure it'll be wonderful. And is the baby coming down with you going to be standing at the altar with you and Michelle?
We're going to try to have him, one of the grandparents holding him and maybe not crying during the ceremony. That's priority number one. And then we'll definitely get some nice photos, but we have our cute little family. We've got the dog and the baby, and things are going well. Life has been pretty kind to us. So we're very lucky.
Well deserved. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Jason. It's good to see you.
So you never miss an episode of the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel and on all major podcasting platforms at Best Hour of Their Day. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a part of the best hour of our day. See you next time.